is being communicated to laymen or regular people like me. I'm not really a peace activist or a practitioner, or someone from the government or NGO. But I wanted to point out that there's a need to deepen or enlighten the definitions of peace. There are many it seems like peace dialogue is bound just to or limited to the MOA. I think it's more of educating the media so that the media can educate the people like me. The media is very war-oriented. It sounds that the language that they use, or that I myself, I wanted to review the roots of conflict, because I'm an urbanite. I'm educated here, and I come from a prestigious university, but still I don't find myself connected. No? Also it doesn't address all levels of security, which is connected to peace, very much connected to peace. So it only addresses the political security. So it shouldn't just be about the land issue. There are a lot of issues, basic needs also. Like Ma'am Maritas mentioned, that effective responses by people, emotional responses, or their basic needs or rights being neglected, they escalate to bitterness. And so if not addressed, these are very prone to fanaticism or conflict. And then aside from that, like I mentioned, the definitions of peace. Peace dialogue may have various languages. Like there's very positive stories that I don't get to hear anywhere. There's like stories of young Muslims doing texting brigades for ceasefire. Like they remind each other in communities that there are other troops coming in and all. But lastly, I wanted to just know if I'm missing out something, because there's always talk of ceasefire, but there's no sustainable long-term thinking of disarmament. So I just wanted to, very, very innocent questions, but I hope this can be addressed also.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A fourth question, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Captain Roel Jerome Baba from the Philippine Army. I would just like to share my thoughts, sir.
I'd like to welcome you, Captain.
Thank you, sir. I finished the 35th program for development managers here at AIM in year 2002. And I was able to secure an invitation to this lecture when I attended the conference on climate change last week.
Yes, thank you.
I wish to thank the Secretariat of the AIM Policy Center for allowing me to extend the invitation to my colleagues. And so this afternoon, I am joined by my office boss, the spokesman of the Philippine Army, Lieutenant Colonel Romeo S. Browner Jr.
Welcome.
And his deputy of the Armed Forces of the Philippines Human Rights Handbook. We are here not in our official capacities as officers of the Army Public Affairs Office, but rather in our individual capacities as students of peace building. So to our Magsaysay awardee, our heartfelt gratitude, sir, for you sharing us your wisdom. And we hope that soldiers like us would always be allowed to participate in similar fora in the future. Very good. Salamat po.
Well, before the next question, Captain, I just would like to welcome you warmly. When I was teaching at the Ateneo, I had among my students also graduates from the Philippine Military Academy, and it really enriched the discussion in the class. I wish that your involvement may be more sustained, especially with those of us who hope that our energies would be directed towards a just and lasting peace in this country. So we thank you very much for being here with us today. Yes, please.
Well, this time, this is a question, sir. Let me start by saying that there is perhaps no other group that prays for peace more than the soldiers. And I agree entirely that interfaith dialogue is indeed the path to peace. But I also believe that a dialogue should be done between two legitimate entities. However, with the recent violence perpetrated by the MILF in Mindanao, there is now a question as to the legitimacy of the MILF as the other party in the dialogue. So my question is, do you think the MILF is the legitimate organization that represents the interest of the Bangsamoro people? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I had another hand where the sixth one. All right, please. Sorry.
Okay.
You can actually use your mic.
Yeah. Sige, I'm Karen Tanyada of the Gaston Z. Ortigas Peace Institute. And, well, these are very challenging times for peace in the Philippines. I appreciate very much earlier the words of partiality, especially when you mentioned what you said to President Bush. I think an important aspect of dialogue is also speaking the truth and talking about justice. There are many things that we need to do in our country in a situation where there's a long armed conflict, and I think we have not understood enough sometimes also the issue of the majority and the minority, and somehow there is a widespread discrimination that we have not addressed enough. So while we are doing things like trying to call for a ceasefire and somehow to go back to the peace process, I'd just like to share that one thing that we feel important now is to show some more signs of solidarity between and among religions. So one effort that we are trying to do at this season is to, in a way, there had been a tradition before of what they call Duyog Ramadan, which I think it means accompanying the Ramadan. So to bring attention to the need for peace, so many peace groups have come together to start something tomorrow in a place where we will have a fasting to bring attention to the issue of peace. So various groups, Muslim, Christian, and other faiths will start a fast with the start of Ramadan to bring attention to the need for peace. And there will be some prayers, cultural activities, sharing, talking together, maybe understanding the MOA, but also talking about how we can continue the dialogue for peace. So I just like to share that.
Thank you very much, Karen. We are actually about to close the list of questions, but we have two questions from members of the AIM Policy Center, and because we owe them a debt of gratitude for all the hard work they have done to put this together, ladies and gentlemen, before we give them the floor, can you give a big hand to the Policy Center for all the work that they've done? Please.
Hello. Good afternoon. And first, congratulations to Pa Marif. I'm Wilfred Josue. I'm actually an intern for the AIM Policy Center. There are so many great questions a while ago. And also, while looking at our monitor, I noticed that there are a lot of students or young people there as well. And here as well, I can see some young faces and young people. Speaking on behalf of the young people of the Philippines, it's as if with all the news that we are hearing about the beleaguered peace process in Mindanao and all of the stuff going on there, we, the youth, or at least me, including some of my friends, we're simply exhausted with all this news. And this leads us towards not really caring about this stuff happening in Mindanao. And knowing that your organization is really successful vis-a-vis waging peace through interfaith dialogue and cooperation, I'd like to ask, how do you keep your young people like them motivated to work for peace? I am really interested to know how do you keep them motivated so that in my behalf, or at least me and my friends could at least take part in some peace initiative here in Manila, and at least affect this, have an effect in Mindanao. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from our young people, the successor generation of peace advocates. And now finally, Bong, the last word, the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. My question actually builds on the innocent question raised a while ago about also about the need to educate the layman and the media in terms of many things that we thought are very simple in layman, and yet many people find difficult to understand, including people like me. Incidentally, somebody asked about the question or the definition of peace, but in my case, I'd be more interested in terms of defining the word respect. For a couple of times it was mentioned here that it's very important that people should respect each other. But talking about my background in political sociology, respect different things in different countries. For instance, in Africa, when you talk about respect, they actually mean that you have to look at them differently so that you would be able to respect them. In Asia, it could be different. So when you talk about respect in the Asian context, do we actually mean that we should look at the Muslims as different or as the same as the others? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We would now like to return to our principal speaker and to our panelists to please respond. So maybe perhaps we should start with the panelists, and then we will end with our principal speaker, the Ramon Magsaysay awardee. Okay. So among the two ladies, because we have the ladies first. Amina or Marites, who would like to start to respond to a number? We had 7 or 8 questions that were. All right, Amina.
I'll start.
Please. You start.
I'm not going to say what I wrote. That's between you and me. How to retrieve the path to peace in the Philippines. That is going to be so difficult. At this point in time, we are at an impasse. Government has the easiest way to say it in one word is bungled, or in 3 words, dropped the ball with regards to the peace process. I was in Kuala Lumpur to witness the signing on August 5. Now, several of us from the NGO communities in Mindanao went to Kuala Lumpur to see the signing, even though we had been pessimistic that an agreement would really be signed. So when we were there, and then we were told that there was a temporary restraining order and they wouldn't, the memo of agreement would not be signed, we were so depressed, all of us. There were the entire dining room of that hotel in Putrajaya was filled with completely depressed Filipinos. And there is no more depressing sight than Filipinos who are depressed, because normally we're laughing all the time. We're either laughing or we're eating. So how to bring it back? Maruf Shafi was talking about no hidden agenda. There must be sincerity. Yeah. You must be able to talk to your dialogue partner and accept that what he's telling you, he means. How do we bring that back? First, I think the president will have to really support the call of the civilians that there should be a ceasefire, especially since this is the holy month of Ramadan. Why is a ceasefire feasible? Well, part of the agreement that was signed by the government and the MILF, I think in 2001 or 2002, was a ceasefire agreement, and it worked. This agreement, the cessation of hostilities agreement, organized an international monitoring team that was led by Malaysia, organized a local monitoring team. There was a group, the AJAG, that would look at violations of ceasefire agreements, and it worked. And you know how we know it worked? Because in 2002, there were almost 700 incidents of armed violence that was related to the MILF and the government. You know how many there were in 2007, last year? 7. So the peace agreement did bring peace and order to this area. So why don't we implement this agreement all over again? Once you bring the fighting back down to a minimum, people can breathe, people can think, then I think you can bring the peace process back on track and people can start talking. We need a reprieve, especially since it is the holy month of Ramadan. The second question, ceasefire without disarmament. In any peace agreement, normally DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, always happens at the latter part of the negotiations. In this country, it's very difficult to think of disarming a liberation front before you have an agreement with them, because that's why you're doing an agreement with them, because they picked up their arms and started fighting government. This also answers the other question: who do you talk to? Who do you negotiate with? Why are you negotiating with the MILF and not with the people? Well, it's because the people did not get arms and start fighting government. The MILF did. So the government went to the MILF and said, put down your guns, let's talk. Let's fight with words. Let's not fight with bullets. And that's what they have been doing. You know how long the MILF and the government have been negotiating? I mean, the memo of agreement on ancestral domain took 4.5 years. But the actual negotiations with the MILF started in 1997 under the term of President Ramos. So many years of trust building up, of actual discussions between MILF and the military across the table, resulting in positive aspects. This has worked. And if we had had the signing of the memo of agreement, then the next thing to tackle, I suppose, would be demobilization, disarmament. But again, a caution: how can we talk about disarming rebel groups when in this country, what we call loose firearms, firearms that are illegally held by civilians, there are hundreds and thousands of loose firearms in this country. And I am sure that our leaders know exactly who have got these firearms. They cannot even get those. How can they now expect to get the firearms of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front? With the fighting going on, the question was, has this diminished the legitimacy of the MILF as a negotiating partner? Well, I don't really think so. Again, for the reason that I said earlier, the reason why there's negotiation for peace is because government wanted an end to fighting with the MILF. So if you want the MILF to really give up its war for independence and agree to become part of the Philippine Republic, stay within the state, be part of the Filipino nation, then there must be negotiations. Because whether we like it or not, the demands of the MILF have legitimacy and credibility. They are supported by the constituency that they represent. What are they asking for? They're not asking for appointive government positions or houses or cars or things like that. They're asking for the right to self-determination, the right for the Moros of the South to live according to the tenets of Islam, according to our cultural traditions. So there is legitimacy in the demand, and they must go back to the negotiating table.
I think the question may have dealt with the killings that may have taken place soon after the signing did not take place. Would you be able to respond to that?
Yeah, you know, it was really suspicious that less than 24 hours after the non-signing of the memo of agreement, there was fighting immediately. And then we found out that there had been some skirmishes already in that area in Lanao del Norte. To tie it immediately with the non-signing of the MOA is a move that's designed to break the faith of the people who will read the news, who will be, as our young artist friend said, who use media to destroy confidence in a peace process. So we really do need to take time, breathe, let the mechanisms that have worked in maintaining the ceasefire agreement, let them work, let them investigate and find out what really happened. And if whatever the violations are, then they have to deal with those who violated the terms of agreement. But having said that, still, the reason why government is in negotiations with the MILF is because they want the MILF to, forgo their arms. If there is no peace agreement, then what really worries us who are from Mindanao is that the MILF will, go back to the hills? I don't think that's going to be something that this country looks forward to. We have suffered too much already for too long. We need to move forward. We were so looking forward to peace. And now, all of a sudden, we're back to, as you said, Ed, we're on the brink of war.
Thank you very much, Amina. And I would now like to ask Pa Ahmad Shafi Ma'arif to round up our session by responding to some of the questions, and we eagerly await some of your thoughts.
Thank you. I think there are three words which have been lost in our modern life. The words are justice, sincerity, and wisdom. I follow Dr. Toynbee's phrase about when he mentioned about Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens in many circumstances be understood as a man who think or person who think. But Mr. Toynbee give definition more challenging definition. Homo sapiens mean a person who has wisdom, wise man. And our present age, we have it is very difficult now to find a wise man, a wisdom in our modern life. So I think we have to restore, to revive these three words again, to save the future of our sapien, of our species, including to how to have peace in Mindanao, to stick to these three words: justice, sincerity, and wisdom. Without those words, I think it would be very difficult to have a solution in our life. Yeah, that's my general statement.
Well, thank you very much for those wise words, and we will keep to heart your counsel to emphasize justice, sincerity, and wisdom. Now, to summarize the discussions today, I have found out that the summary in itself is a daunting task, and that it is a very important and integral part of our proceedings. Fortunately, we have a man whom I have always called the great synthesizer. Poch Macaranas, in fact, synthesizes in his own life the fields of the academe, business, and government. He was Assistant Secretary for Foreign Affairs, and later on he was Undersecretary for Economic Affairs in the Department of Foreign Affairs. He received the highest award given by the Philippine government for diplomatic service, which is called the Gawad Mabini. And he is the director of the AIM Policy Center and also the chair of the Center for Servant Leadership. And finally, he is also a trustee of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, the synthesizer.
Thank you, Pamari, Ms. Brazil, Ms. Gingon Africa, our friends from Indonesia, especially Consul Dilem, and the students of the University of Indonesia, and fellow participants here in Makati. A very warm afternoon here for all of the nice thoughts that Pama Arif gave us on how to wage peace through interfaith dialogue and cooperation. Indeed, very relevant, as many of us note, in view of what is happening in Mindanao. We recall that some decades ago, some writers said that there was a clash of civilizations. And that was going to happen in this part of the world because these civilizations did not understand how each other lived. And this is at the heart of our understanding of the great issues that are confronting us today. I will synthesize it by saying there are two dimensions of the world we address. One is material, and the other one is spiritual. And because of that, we have conflicts because we are very poor. Both Indonesia and the Philippines share the same economic deprivation indices. And somehow in our growth, we forget that parts of our countries are left behind. And this is in the essence of how we formulated the BIMP IAGA, the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN Growth Area, in an attempt to redress the neglect that capitals have foisted on these regions of our respective countries. In that light, we had a very interesting discussion of basic things, like a definition. What is peace? Indeed, on the spiritual side, it is perhaps an individual recognition of an inner self that is able to adjust to the surrounding. And some reflected on this by saying that there are attributes like freedom from fear, especially of violence, from many sources, and of course freedom from the war that is very common in areas where the material deprivation causes many to be radicalized. But we also did not understand peace in the sense of a ceasefire, because that's not permanent. And hence, to make it more permanent, this is what interfaith dialogue and cooperation apparently is trying to achieve. What people have called dialogue plus plus, or bishops and ulamas also trying to solve good governance problems. Not just to address spiritual, but also material deprivation. So this is part of our understanding now as we dialogue on a number of issues. We asked, what are the types of terrorism? Pama Arif gave us his views that there are individual terrorism, group terrorism, and state terrorism. And we were then asked to locate the reasons for radicalism, not only in the spiritual dimension, what Pama Arif says is humiliation, but also in the physical and material deprivation, which is my other variable. So based on that, radicalism is not only based on material deprivation, but spiritual deprivation that will include social injustices and hidden agendas of stakeholders, so that when you come to the negotiations table, perhaps you do not fully share what you intend to do. And this is perhaps also part of the majority-minority syndrome, which some of you noted, may in fact not be the problem. But because it has been raised, I would say that some people do think that it still remains unresolved, as one or two participants did indicate. So what is our current status? Perhaps we are in a less tolerant and more fearful and violent world. We are also in a low-growth country. So on both the spiritual and the material dimensions, we are on the end that says we have less of both. Where do we want to go, and where does waging peace through interfaith dialogue and cooperation wish to move us? Well, we want to have more spiritual and more material growth. And maybe this is the ideal world of not only having dialogues for thought leadership, as one of the participants noted, but beyond thought leadership. Because we have to move, and hence it becomes very important to have not only the sincerity of talking to avoid the humiliation of being subjugated by some force, but also to have the justice and the wisdom. And this justice and wisdom, Pama Arif notes, will be critical in Mindanao today, in the Philippines as well. So that if we were to go to our ideal world of more material and more spiritual growth, the wisdom perhaps should be, let us also get ourselves out of poverty, which is a main root of radicalism and of minority dissension. It is quite important that the minds of people be educated into the reality of the world. And one or two suggested that perhaps the media has a role. Because in clarifying what we want, we must really come to terms with misperceptions by the public, because one or two groups might be manipulating the news in order to fit only what they want the world to understand. And this is precisely where the independence of a group is called for. And I am very impressed by Muhammadiyah's ability to be that kind of organization in Indonesia. Very independent, and yet able to stress the kind of messages that are needed in a country so huge that you would think it would self-destruct. But it did not, precisely because it has principles based on Panchasila, things that the majority of the people believe in, and things perhaps that our own people in Mindanao might want to reflect upon. It is very important that beyond some of the things that we discuss, there is, as one said, a greater good. Perhaps that is the greatness of spirit in selfless service to people that we are looking for. The very spirit that the Magsaysay awardees embody. One that Pama Arif has dramatically shown when he confronted not only the terrorists in the Bali bombing and in the U.S. invasion of a Middle East country. I think it is very important to stress finally the fact that it is this great spirits in selfless service that after all reflect the best of the kind of leaders we need in these trying times. So thank you very much, Pama Arif, for making it possible for us to really understand the dimensions of true peace building.
Thank you very much. Well, before we leave, the AI and Policy Center has requested us to please fill out your evaluation forms. They would be very grateful if you could fill them out for feedback. Now, I would like to, before we finally leave the room, could I please, all of us here in the Philippines, could we give our thanks and our greetings of solidarity with our brothers and sisters of the Filipino community and Indonesian students? Could we give them a big hand? And we would like to thank all of the participants here, and all together, both Indonesia and the Philippines, could we give a very big hand to the Ramon Magsaysay Awardee for Peace and International Understanding, Pa Ahmad Shafi'i Arif. Thank you very much and good day.